They say your mind rewrites trauma, softens the angles, so you can survive it. But there's one memory I've never been able to sand down. It's the way his fingers slipped out of mine. We were standing near the carousel. Mason had a snow cone in one hand, the other still curled around mine. Then a loud cheer erupted near the midway. I turned just for a second. When I looked back, my hand was empty. And the next 12 years of my life began. Before I go any further, let me know where you're listening from down in the comments and tap that, like and subscribe if stories like this ever brushed past your hometown or your own life. Every click helps pull another forgotten name back into the light. My name's Sarah Whitman. I live just outside Sacramento in a quiet one-bedroom where the pipes knock when the heater kicks in. I'm 42 now, though sometimes it feels like I stopped aging at 30. That was the year everything split open. Back then, I taught English at Sheldon High, wore cardigans, packed my lunch-corrected essays on weekends. I wasn't special, just someone who liked her world tidy. I paid bills on time, kept birthday cards in shoeboxes, made pancakes shaped like dinosaurs on Sunday mornings. Mason was 7 the summer he disappeared. A blur of energy with a chipped front tooth and a baseball cap he refused to wear straight. He loved toy dinosaurs, knock-knock jokes, and holding my hand when he was tired. He used to ask me if I thought he'd remember things when he grew up. I always said if it's important, your heart will remember it even if your brain forgets. I used to believe that. That July, I planned a surprise trip for him. We were going to Santa Cruz, just the two of us. Cotton candy bumper cars, the Ferris wheel. He'd been begging for it all year. The morning of the trip, he woke me up by banging 2 spoons together like cymbals. We left just before noon. I remember the smell of sunscreen, the buzz of cicadas in the car lot. He wore his favorite Spider-Man shirt already stained at the sleeve from breakfast syrup. I remember thinking this is what motherhood should feel like. Light, easy, full. The boardwalk was packed. It was a Saturday. Families everywhere. Balloons bobbing, music blaring. We rode the tilt-a-whirl twice, played skee-ball. Mason won a stuffed bear with one arm. At some point we stopped for cherry snow cones. The heat was rising off the pavement in waves. I remember wiping a drip off his chin. He asked to ride the bumper cars again. I told him we'd go after the carousel. He smiled, bounced ahead of me toward the cotton candy stand, and that was the last time I saw him whole. I didn't know that the minutes that followed would be the last time I ever felt certain about anything. At the time, I thought he'd just wandered, that maybe he'd looped around the arcade or ducked behind a trash bin chasing a ticket stub. He was fast like that, curious. But when I called his name and no one turned, not even the mascot waving by the carousel, something in my chest pulled tight. Not fear, not yet, just the first quiet crack in the glass. I walked back to where we'd last stood, then forward, then back again, and somewhere in that pattern, I started to panic. I ran past the cotton candy stand twice, then circled back to the arcade, calling Mason's name louder each time. The noise of the park swallowed my voice. I tried to remember what direction he'd last turned, but everything blurred together. The bright lights, the sound of the carousel, the smell of hot grease from a nearby funnel cake cart. I walked faster, then jogged, scanning faces. A boy in a red shirt sprinted past me and my chest jumped, but it wasn't him. His hair was too light, his shoes too new. I kept going. I passed a couple wrapped around each other near the photo booth, then a man in a dolphin costume who waved like everything was fine. I stopped long enough to ask, "Did you see a boy? Spider-Man shirt? Dark hair?" He shook his head and kept waving. That's when I felt it, the line between worry and something colder starting to snap. I flagged down a security guard, or maybe he flagged me. I don't remember which came first. He looked young, maybe college-aged, with sunglasses perched on his hat and a radio clipped to his vest. I told him my son was missing. I tried to be calm, but my voice cracked. He was right here. 7 years old. Red shirt, Spider-Man. He asked if Mason might have gone to the restroom on his own. I told him no, never without me. The guard spoke into his radio and gestured toward a staff-only entrance. I followed. That's when I noticed my hands were sticky from the snow cone I'd been holding. I threw it in a trash bin without looking. Inside the staff office, everything smelled like old coffee and lemon cleaner. I filled out a form. They asked for Mason's last known location, what he was wearing, if he had any medical conditions. I gave them everything. I tried not to shake while I spoke. A woman came in, maybe a manager, maybe just someone with more authority in her voice. She said they'd check the cameras, alert all staff, and begin a soft lockdown for the park. I didn't know what that meant. I still don't. I asked if I should call the police. She said they already had. I stood there staring at the door until I heard a radio crackle something about Zone 4. The next hour bled out in long stretches of nothing. I walked the park with 2 officers showing them where we'd last been. They asked questions. Had Mason been upset? Was he prone to running off? Did I see anyone suspicious? I said no, and I didn't know. I kept thinking he'd appear around the next corner, that maybe I'd missed something obvious, something simple. I pictured him crouched behind a bench or stuck in a crowd watching a clown make balloon animals. But each place we looked came up empty. Ethan arrived just after 3. He'd been working at the hospital that morning training new security hires. He looked pale when he saw me, then angry. "Why wasn't he with you?" he asked, and I didn't answer. Not because I didn't have one, but because I was trying not to scream. We walked the park again. I kept thinking if I could just explain the moment out loud, how fast it happened, how close he had been, it might somehow rewind time. It didn't. They closed the park gates at 4:15. People were annoyed. Some yelled at staff. Others stared at me like I was a problem, not a mother looking for her child. The police brought in a K9 unit. The dog sniffed Mason's backpack, then followed a scent trail halfway to the boardwalk exit before losing it. That's when I felt the first real wave of cold panic, like something had already taken him out of reach. By nightfall, news vans had shown up, lights, microphones, cables underfoot. I stood behind the carousel giving a statement I barely remember. I said his name. I said his age. I held up the same photo I kept in my wallet, the one from his last birthday where he's laughing with frosting on his cheek. It felt wrong to say anything aloud, like naming the fear might make it more real, but it already was. I didn't sleep that night. None of us did. My sister drove up from San Jose and sat with me at the motel while police questioned Ethan in another room. They had to. Protocol, I guess. He didn't fight it. He looked as hollowed out as I felt. I stared at the motel's floral bedspread and counted every second until daylight. The next morning we returned to the park. Closed now. Empty. Officers walked the grounds with printed flyers and metal rods they used to check dumpsters and storm drains. One officer lifted the lid of a large trash bin by the churro stand. I had to turn away. A few more people came forward claiming they might have seen Mason earlier that day. A woman thought she saw a boy fitting his description near the skee-ball machines. A man said a kid in a red shirt ran past him around 2:30. None of it led anywhere. By the end of the week, the leads dried up. No one saw anything. The cameras facing the arcade malfunctioned between 2:15 and 2:30 p.m. due to a power surge, according to the report. The footage leading up to it showed nothing out of the ordinary. No struggle, no adults acting strange, no sign of Mason. Flyers went up. I recorded a plea on local news. His face was shared across Facebook groups and missing persons boards. I called the station daily. Some nights, I left voicemails just to hear myself say his name into the dark. Ethan and I started sleeping in separate rooms. Eventually, he stopped sleeping altogether. One afternoon, I opened our mailbox and found a folded piece of paper with no envelope, just one line written in uneven block letters. "You don't watch him close enough." I took it straight to the police. They logged it, fingerprinted it, ran the ink. Nothing came back. They said it was probably a prank, someone sick trying to insert themselves into the story. But I kept it, folded it twice, and slid it into a manila envelope along with every flyer, every photo, every scrap of his handwriting. Weeks passed. The search narrowed, then faded. People stopped calling. Some stopped making eye contact. Strangers crossed the street to avoid my face on the news. The park reopened. Kids screamed on roller coasters again. Summer ended. Then fall. Then the silence settled in like dust. They never found his backpack. Never found his shoes. Never found the balloon he'd been holding, the red one in the shape of a dinosaur. Just one boy, 7 years old, wearing a Spider-Man shirt, gone without a sound. And on the first anniversary of that day, I sat alone on my porch and watched the sun set at exactly 8:21 p.m., the same time the police called off the search that night. Then I went inside and opened the drawer where I kept the note, and for the first time I noticed something I'd never seen before, pressed into the lower corner, faint but clear in the light. A small watermark, and the number 43. I brought the note to the police again, this time pointing to the faint mark pressed into the paper, barely visible unless the light hit it just right. A circle around a number 43 and a shape that looked almost like a tower or maybe a cross. The officer on duty squinted at it and nodded like he saw it but didn't offer much else, said they'd add it to the file. But the file felt like a drawer that had already been shut. No one called back after that. No one followed up. Even Ethan, when I showed him, just stared at it for a while and finally said, "You sure that wasn't there before?" I didn't answer him, because by then I was starting to realize that no one else really wanted to keep looking. I tried, though. I posted on forums for missing kids, printed out new flyers with the watermark included, sent emails to every local and state agency I could think of. Some bounced. Some went unanswered. I found myself speaking about Mason in quieter tones, in half sentences, like even his name had grown too heavy to carry full weight. At work, I stopped talking in the break room altogether, just graded papers, taught the material, kept to myself. One day a student left a library card behind. It had the name Mason on it. Not my Mason, just another child. But I held on to it for hours before I could convince myself to give it back. The neighbors mostly stopped checking in. I don't blame them. People don't know what to say when the years pass and you're still stuck in the same place. When the casseroles stop coming and you're still setting out toast and coffee like there's someone else at the table. I started attending a support group a few towns over, mostly just to be in a room where silence didn't feel so strange. I didn't talk much, just listened. Some folks shared stories about kids lost to addiction or custody cases gone wrong. I didn't feel like I belonged exactly, but no one asked me to leave. One night, after a session, a woman named Carla sat beside me while we waited for the parking lot to empty. She looked maybe late 50s, small frame, gray sweater with sleeves pushed up to the elbows. She didn't ask anything right away, just said, "You sit like you're holding something too heavy to set down." I nodded. She said she'd lost a daughter years ago. Didn't say how. Just looked straight ahead and added, "Some of us never get to grieve all the way." Then she stood and gave me a quick, almost apologetic pat on the shoulder before walking off. I never saw her again, but I remembered the way she said us. Ethan and I divorced 2 years after Mason disappeared. There wasn't some single moment that broke us, no fight, no betrayal. It was quieter than that, like being in a house where the heat goes out and no one has the energy to fix it. We kept texting for a while, polite. Occasional updates. He worked nights at the hospital now, said it helped to stay busy. Said less and less as time went on. The years blurred. Mason's room became something between a storage closet and a shrine. I kept the things that mattered, The dinosaur drawings, the blanket he slept with, the wooden box with his hospital bracelet tucked inside. Every year on July 22nd, I took the same photo out of its frame, held it like a breath I didn't want to let go, and waited for the sun to set without him. Then came the forum post. It was a Saturday. I was sitting at the kitchen table grading essays with the TV off. The apartment was still the kind of quiet you only get in the late afternoon when no one expects you. My laptop pinged, a new email notification. I almost ignored it. But the subject line stopped me. Looking for info on Mason A. Whitman forum post by Blue Orchid 22. The message linked to a site I'd never seen before. It looked old, barely maintained, called Echoes from Childhood, a space apparently for people who'd grown up in the foster system. The post was 2 days old. Hi. I don't remember much before I was 7, but sometimes I have dreams about a red balloon and a beach. I think my name used to be Mace. Is that anyone I froze? I read it again, and again. The language was clumsy, the kind of message people might scroll past, but something in my chest tightened. That name, that image. I tried to respond, but the forum required an account. My hands shook while I typed in the username. Mistyped the CAPTCHA 3 times. Got the password wrong. Tried again. When I finally hit submit, the page froze for a second, then loaded. But by then, the original post had no replies, no updates, no contact info, nothing. I stared at the screen for hours that night, refreshed the thread, checked the user profile. No bio, no location, no photos, just that one message. I wanted it to be a coincidence. I wanted it not to matter. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. The next morning, I woke up early and drove to Santa Cruz without deciding to. Just got in the car and started moving. The boardwalk was still there. The same flags, the same carousel. Some of the games had changed, but not enough to fool me. The cotton candy stand was still in the same place. I stood there for a long time. People walked around me, laughed, took selfies. No one noticed me just staring. Then I saw the mascot, the dolphin. Different man now, taller, younger, but he stood in the same spot, waved the same way. I whispered Mason's name before I realized I'd spoken it aloud. That night I emailed the moderators of the forum. I explained the situation. I begged for any information about the user, anything. They never replied. But the next day a new post appeared. I keep seeing a woman's face in my dreams. She smells like jasmine. I think she used to sing me a song about stars. If you know what this means, please reply. My whole body went still. Jasmine was the perfume I wore. The Lullaby Starlight Starbright was something I used to sing to Mason every night. I never recorded it. It wasn't in any home video. It wasn't online. It was ours. Just ours. I didn't know what to believe. I didn't know what to do next. But I did know this someone somewhere had said his name. And that silence I'd been living inside for over a decade, it had just cracked open. I stopped sleeping through the night again. It wasn't fear, not exactly. Just something that hovered. I'd lie awake long after midnight, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the lullaby. The jasmine. The phrase, I think my name used to be Mace. I kept hearing it in my head like a line someone whispered through a locked door, and I knew better than to tell myself it was over. I'd lived long enough with silence to know when something was trying to speak through it. I started going back through everything: old notebooks, police reports, Mason's school drawings. I pulled out volume 2 of my journals, the one I'd kept that summer. Most of it was scribbled nonsense lists, thoughts, fragments. But on July 21st, the day before he disappeared, I found a paragraph that made my hands still. He begged to go early. I told him we'd wait until after lunch. He made a deal. If he ate all his carrots, we'd leave by noon. I didn't think he'd actually do it. That's what it said. And just like that, it was back, the sound of his fork scraping against the plate, the smile on his face when I said, "Okay." I flipped to July 22nd. The page was blank. The next few days were a blur of routine I didn't remember choosing. I showed up at school, taught chapters I barely heard myself say, smiled when I had to, but my head was somewhere else. At night, I combed through the forum echoes from childhood, every thread, every username. I searched for mentions of balloons, beaches, red shirts, blue mascots. I kept a notebook open beside me and made a list of every user Blue Orchid 22 had interacted with. There weren't many, but one reply caught my attention. It was in a thread about recurring dreams from childhood group homes. A user named Tangerine Teeth had written, "Hey, I know that basement. Had one just like it in Chico. Think the walls were red. You ever sleep under a skylight with bars on it? There was a lady named Mommy J. She made us call her that." My stomach turned. I opened a new tab and searched those words. Mommy J. Chico, California foster home. One link came up in a local newspaper archive. A short article dated 2016. Unlicensed caregiver Janice K. Lohman, known locally as Mommy J., shut down by Child Services after multiple reports of neglect and improper conditions at informal group foster site. Operated from 2005 to 2016. Location 412 Pine Needle Road, Chico. There was a photo of the woman, stringy blonde hair, pale skin, deep shadows under her eyes. But what caught me wasn't her face. It was the basement window behind her. Metal bars same angle as the photo from the forum post. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I printed the article and put it on the table right next to the page in my journal. 2 days later, I came home from work and found another envelope. No return address, no postage. Just my apartment number scrawled across the front. The handwriting looked the same as the note from years ago. Inside, there was a drawing, crayon on lined paper. A child's sketch of a small boy beside a tall blue figure, round ears, blank face, rabbit-shaped. The boy wore a red shirt and had a down-turned mouth. Beneath them, in uneven letters, he said I was lucky. I got to leave the others behind. I sat with that for a long time. The others. I didn't know what it meant, but it changed everything. It meant Mason hadn't been alone. That evening I called Reyes. I hadn't spoken to her in years. Linda Reyes had been the lead investigator on Mason's case in 2012. Retired now. Back then she was sharp, methodical, always a step ahead of every dead end. I remember the day she told me they were calling off the active search. She cried when I didn't. She agreed to meet me the next morning. We sat in a diner 2 blocks from the old precinct. She wore a beige windbreaker gold crucifix around her neck. Her hair was grayer than I remembered, but her eyes hadn't changed. I showed her the forum posts, the Polaroid, the drawing. I didn't need to say anything. She looked over everything slowly, carefully. Finally, she said, "I've thought about this case more times than I can count, and there were things that never sat right." I asked, "What things?" She lowered her voice. The lack of witnesses, the security footage that glitched, and something one of the janitors said at the time about a blue costume. My breath caught. "You mean the dolphin?" She shook her head. "No. He said a blue bunny, but when we checked, none of the employees admitted wearing that suit. It was never logged. The suit itself disappeared. No record. Nothing in storage. It was just gone." When I got home, I opened my laptop and started watching old home videos. I hadn't touched them in years. They were all saved to a folder I could barely bring myself to open. Mason's birthday parties, him feeding the cat, reading bedtime books out loud. Then I found one clip he must have been 5. He's waving a plastic dinosaur at the camera, giggling. But just behind him, near the edge of the frame, something moves in the background. I paused, rewound, watched again. A figure in a blue rabbit costume, just barely in focus, standing still near the back of the room. I hadn't noticed it before. I printed out the frame, circled the figure in red, and called Reyes again. She came to the apartment with a folder of her own. Inside was a still from a lost batch of park surveillance footage, one that had been archived but never properly reviewed. It showed the same blue bunny, same posture, same angle by the carousel. Reyes stared at the printout I'd made. "That's him," she said. Then she looked at me. 3 minutes before Mason disappeared. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat on the floor beside the bed holding the photo of Mason. My head spun with questions. The suit, the drawing, Mommy J, the forum post. Who was helping him reach out now? Why now? Just after 2 a.m. My phone buzzed. An email. No subject line. Sender blueorchid22 protonmail.com. The message read, "Do you remember the song about stars? Because I can't stop hearing it in my head." I read it twice, then 3 times. My hands went cold. That lullaby had never been recorded. It wasn't in any of the videos. It wasn't in my journals. I never wrote it down. I only sang it to him, quietly, at bedtime, in the dark. And somehow he remembered. Or someone wanted me to believe he did. I stared at the screen for a long time after that message came in. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I knew exactly what it meant. The words weren't random. That lullaby was private, quietly ours and nowhere else. It was the kind of detail that didn't survive by accident. I typed slowly, careful not to scare the moment away. "Who are you? Where are you? Please. I think I'm your mother." I hovered over the send button, clicked, then I waited. Minutes passed, then an hour, then sunrise. No reply. But something did come left just past dawn, placed directly at my door. A small padded envelope. No return address. Just my apartment number written in thick black ink, slanted like it was rushed. I bent to pick it up, fingers already unsteady. Inside I found a single blue wristband. The kind they handed out at the boardwalk for VIP passes. The lettering was faded, but I could still make out Santa Cruz printed along the band. Below that, folded once, was a photograph. A Polaroid low-light unfocused. It showed a child, small frame, maybe 7, maybe older, now sitting on a mattress in what looked like a basement. His face was turned halfway, so I couldn't be sure. But what caught me wasn't the child. It was what sat just beside him, a plastic dinosaur, the same kind Mason used to carry around in his pocket. Not the same model, the same toy, right down to the chipped tail. I called Reyes. She was at my door within the hour. She brought gloves, plastic evidence sleeves, and a small notepad that already had my name written at the top. She inspected the wristband first, then the photo, then the envelope. She didn't say much, just nodded, slipped each item into its own bag. "Could this be Mason?" she asked quietly. "It could," I said. "Or it could be someone trying to make me think it is." She nodded again. "Either way, this needs testing." She had a contact at a private lab in Berkeley that sometimes took cold cases on forensics analysis, no official police channel, but trustworthy. She told me it could take days, maybe weeks. They'd look for prints, fibers, anything identifiable. In the meantime, all we could do was wait. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept my laptop open, refreshing the forum, checking the email. I made a new list this time, every post blueorchid22 had made on the site. There were only 3. In a different thread, buried in a section about foster home memories, I found another reply. This one was from a user named Tangerine Teeth, the same name I'd seen before. They'd written, "Hey, I know that basement. Had one just like it in Chico. Think the walls were red. You ever sleep under a skylight with bars on it? There was a lady named Mommy J. She made us call her that. I copied the comment and searched again. Chico, California. Foster care. Unlicensed homes. The article I'd found days earlier popped back up. Janice K. Lohman, known alias Mommy J, ran an unofficial group home outside city limits. Shut down by Child Services in 2016. I printed it again, circled the address. 412 Pine Needle Road. The next morning I called in a personal day at school. Didn't explain, just said it was family related. Then I drove. The house was still there, chipped siding, dried up lawn windows boarded. The mailbox was full of damp circulars. A chain-link fence wrapped around the side, but one corner had collapsed. I parked across the street and sat for a while. Eventually a man with a gray beard and a rake came into view, pulling weeds next door. I stepped out and crossed toward him. "Excuse me," I said. "Do you remember who lived here?" He looked at the house, then at me. "You mean Janice?" I nodded. "Did kids live there?" He squinted. "If you call it that. Always a bunch of them. Quiet. Looked hungry. Never smiled. Heard screaming once or twice. Should have called somebody. I didn't. I asked if he remembered a boy about 7, dark hair, red shirt. Name was Mason. There was one who used to run, he said. Had a little green dinosaur. Real quiet. Didn't talk much. Then one day he was just gone. Back home that night I refreshed my inbox again. There was a new message. From the same address as before. No subject line. Just one sentence. "Sometimes I dream about someone calling my name. It feels real." "Is that you?" I typed back without thinking. "Yes, it's me. I never stopped calling." The reply came fast. "Then why did you stop looking?" I stared at the screen, heart pounding. I answered carefully. "I didn't stop. I'm still looking." The final reply that night was just 2 words. "Prove it." The next morning another package arrived. Same black ink, same crooked handwriting. Inside was a spiral-bound notebook, child-sized, maybe 2nd grade level. On the front, written in uneven marker, "My name is not Mason." I flipped through the pages. Some were scribbles, some were drawings. Houses with no windows, faces with X's through the eyes. Figures wearing rabbit masks. On one page, written in thick black letters. The bunny said, "If I talk, I go back in the dark." My stomach turned. But that wasn't the worst part. Tucked into the center spiral, folded twice, was something else. A bracelet. Plastic blue beads, one silver charm in the middle shaped like a star. I sat down. I had made that bracelet for Mason when he was 5. He wore it the day he disappeared. We had matching ones. Mine was still in my jewelry box. I held it up and stared at the star. Reyes came by later that evening. She held the bracelet in her palm, then looked at me. "I believe you now," she said. I asked her. "You didn't before." She hesitated. "I wanted to, but you sounded like someone trying to build something out of silence. Now I think someone's trying to help you break it." After she left, I logged back into the forum. There was a new post. I think my name used to be Mason A. Whitman, but the man in the rabbit suit said it wasn't. He told me they stopped looking. He said nobody loved me anymore. But now I think he lied. If you're reading this and you remember the song, write the next line. I sat there for a while, hands trembling, then typed the words slowly. "Starlight star, bright, first star. I see tonight. I wish I may." And hit post. The message sat online for 3 days. No reply, no edits, no indication it had even been seen. I refreshed it every morning, every hour I was home. And then, just when I started to wonder if maybe it had all gone quiet again, my laptop dinged. Another message. Just one sentence. "I remember your voice now." The message was only 5 words, but they anchored me in place. "I remember your voice now." I read it over and over, lips moving without sound. I couldn't tell if I was shaking from hope or fear. I wanted to write back to ask where he was if he was safe, but I didn't want to scare it away. I sat with it until the sun came up. At 6:30, just as I was reaching for my coat to leave for school, there was a knock at the door. No one stood outside, just another padded envelope on the mat. Same handwriting, same heavy ink. I picked it up slowly. Inside was a USB drive. No note, no label, just the drive. I plugged it into my laptop and opened the only file it held. A video. Grainy handheld. The lens jittered. It showed a hallway, narrow, dim concrete walls. The camera moved slowly past a set of doors. One of them had something painted on it, a faded blue star. A sound came next, barely above a whisper. A child crying. Then a voice, low and flat, muffled behind the door. "We don't say names here. We don't ask questions. We don't remember." Then static. I pulled the earbuds out and closed the laptop. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just sat there feeling the shape of something terrible settle into place. Reyes came over later that morning. She watched the video without asking any questions. When it ended, she stared at the still frame, the door. The blue star then picked up her phone. She didn't say much, just asked a contact to trace the metadata. Location, timestamp, anything. She hung up and looked at me. If there's even a partial tag in there, they'll find it. The call came that evening. Coordinates pointed to a remote area in Humboldt County, North Woods, a rural compound once owned by a dissolved religious group. They'd called themselves Children of the Pathway. No recent activity, no current registration, but Reyes had heard the name before. Something about rehab through faith alternative education behavioral corrections. It wasn't a formal facility, more like a cluster of cabins posing as a community. She didn't wait for a warrant. Neither did I. We left the next morning before sunrise. The drive took almost 6 hours. The roads narrowed until the forest pressed in on both sides. Fog clung to the trees, low and slow. We found the property near the end of an unpaved access road. Overgrown. Quiet. The sign out front had been painted over, but you could still make out the word pathway beneath a layer of chipped gray. We stepped through a gap in the fence. The place felt dead, but not abandoned. Like it had been sealed, not forgotten. The buildings were scattered long halls with broken windows, a chapel with a collapsed roof, a utility shed covered in ivy. The main structure stood deeper and 3 stories tall. Half of it scorched black like it had caught fire years ago. The doors were chained, but a side entrance had caved in. We slipped through. The inside smelled like mildew and ash. Layers of paper plaster and silence coated every surface. Reyes moved first flashlight in hand, slow and methodical. We found the basement stairs tucked behind a waterlogged door at the end of the hall. I followed her down. The air grew colder with each step. The walls narrowed. At the bottom, a row of doors lined the corridor, most of them open, revealing bare mattresses, wire shelving, and broken toys. At the end of the hall, we saw it. The door with the blue star. The paint was faded, but still visible. Beneath the handle, a strip of wood had been worn smooth like someone had scratched at it again and again. Reyes crouched and ran her gloved hand across the surface. Dozens of marks. Fingernail deep. Inside the room was nearly empty. No windows. One cot, one drain in the floor. But on the back wall, carved into the concrete, were 2 sets of initials. MW plus TT. I traced them with my fingers. The shape of them. The pressure it must have taken to etch those lines. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. I knew what they meant. We returned to Sacramento that night, quiet the whole drive. The federal team took over the next day. Reyes called in one final favor, her last act before officially stepping back. The site was sealed. Dogs were brought in. Ground radar. interviews with anyone connected to the group, though most had scattered years earlier. And through it all, one phrase kept surfacing. The children were already forgotten. No one would say more. Records were missing, names redacted. We weren't allowed into the meetings. I didn't care. I sat in the observation room staring at the file Reyes left me. I didn't want courtrooms or headlines. I just wanted a door to open. One evening I wrote a final message. "Mason, if you're out there, I'm not asking for proof anymore. I just want to see you, even for a second. Just let me know where." The reply came the next morning. "There's a bus stop. Friday, 4:15. Billboard with the red flower." That's all it said. No location, no name, no confirmation. But I knew what it meant. I arrived early. The Greyhound station in Eureka sat under low clouds and mist. The billboard above the bench showed a perfume ad red petals curling out of a white bottle. I sat with my hands clasped, trying not to count the seconds. The rain was soft, the kind that settles more than it falls. At exactly 4:17, a young man walked toward the bench. Hoodie, canvas backpack, jeans a little too short at the ankles. He kept his head down and sat without speaking. I turned slightly, waiting. He said, "I used to dream you had wings." I turned fully. It was him. Older, pale, eyes darker than I remembered. But him. I didn't move. Just asked, "May I?" He nodded. I reached out slowly and wrapped my arms around him. He didn't cry, but I did. He smelled like cold air and old cloth. We didn't speak for a while. When we did, it was only fragments. The man in the costume, the basement, the quiet room, Theo, the things he was told. He'd been told I had signed something, that I gave him away, that no one remembered him, that his name wasn't real. He asked me, "Why didn't you come?" I said I never stopped trying. Then I asked, "What do you want me to do?" And he said, "Find Theo." That night I unpacked the files again, the notes, the notebook, the drawing. I went back through the forums. I read every message, every half-finished sentence, every dream someone had posted about red walls and blue stars. And I noticed something I hadn't seen before. A reply to a message from years ago. Someone had mentioned a psychologist, a doctor, a name I didn't recognize at first, but Reyes did. The next morning we started again. A new list, a new name, and one question we couldn't shake. Who was Theo, and where had he gone? We started with the name. I remembered from the forum thread Dr. Glenn Braver. He had worked as a child psychologist contracted by the state and several private agencies between 2009 and 2015. Reyes recognized it right away. She said he'd been on a few cases involving hard-to-place children, kids from troubled group homes or unlicensed settings, the ones no one wanted to take accountability for. A search showed he'd last practiced out of San Jose. We drove down the next morning. The address listed led us to a gated neighborhood, manicured hedges, brick mailbox pillars. The kind of place where every house looked like a postcard. A woman answered the door, housekeeper maybe in her 50s, sharp eyes, cautious tone. We asked for Dr. Braver. She told us he'd died months ago. Hiking accident in Peru. Heart failure. I asked if he'd left behind any documents or files. She shook her head and said everything had been collected by an organization called Emberlight. I'd never heard of it. Reyes had. Emberlight Behavioral. It had once operated a facility out of Redding, California, focused on what they called alternative child recovery programs. Not officially licensed as a medical center, but tied to multiple court referrals and family placements. We found a single PDF online archived on an old blog. A brochure poorly scanned, likely forgotten. It listed staff volunteers' program philosophies. At the bottom of the second page, under residential supervision, Janice K. Lohman, The same woman, the same alias, Mommy J. Her name, her handwriting, her basement window. It was all connected. Reyes and I drove up to Redding the next morning. The building was still standing, though the letters above the entrance had long since peeled down to just EM. We found a side door unsecured and stepped inside. The place had been gutted. Collapsed shelves, wet tile, broken glass. Mold crawled up the baseboards, and somewhere deeper inside I could hear the slow drip of a leaking pipe. We made our way toward the old records room, or what was left of it. Most of the folders had been tossed across the floor or chewed through by rats. I didn't expect to find anything usable, but then I saw it buried under a pile of collapsed shelving almost untouched. A slim folder yellowed at the edges. It was labeled Theo Tanner. My chest tightened. I opened it. A basic intake form. Age 6. Transferred from another location, no prior medical records. Under discharge status, it simply said unknown. No date, no follow-up. Tucked behind the form was a drawing. Crayon. A blue bunny with blank eyes. And beside it, a child with red X's across the face. I held it without speaking until Reyes reached over and placed a hand on my shoulder. "We're getting closer," she said. I nodded, but closer to what I didn't know. Later that night I checked my email, another message from the Proton Mail account. "You found Theo?" I replied instantly. I found where he was. He drew the bunny too. A few minutes passed. Then came the next line. "Then I believe you. Can I tell you a secret?" My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I typed, "Yes, anything." The reply came back almost immediately. "I think the man in the bunny costume was your ex-husband." For a moment, I didn't breathe. I read the sentence 3 times, then again slower. Your ex-husband. Ethan. I stared at the wall. I tried to remember every detail of that day 12 years ago now. I knew Ethan had been at the park. I knew he'd gone to get water around 2. I knew he came back holding 2 bottles and handed one to me without looking up. But I couldn't remember seeing him for nearly an hour before Mason disappeared. I'd never thought to question it. We were together. We were still a family back then. I'd assumed he was in the crowd, that we just missed each other. But now I wasn't so sure. I called him the next morning. He answered, voice groggy. "Sarah, I told him I needed to see him. He said okay. We met at a diner off Stockton Boulevard, the one we used to go to when Mason was little. I brought a folder with me. Inside it I had the photo of the blue bunny, the crayon drawing the forum messages. I didn't say anything at first, just slid the folder across the table. Ethan opened it and blinked. "What is this?" he asked. I stared at him. "You tell me. Were you wearing that suit?" His face didn't register shock, just confusion. Then a flicker of something else. "Are you serious?" I didn't answer. He shook his head slowly. "You really think I had something to do with this?" I didn't look away. "Just say no." He exhaled. "No. I didn't take him. But..." He paused. "But I wore the suit." Everything inside me went still. He explained that a friend, someone from his old shift, had been scheduled to wear the mascot costume that day. The guy had called in sick, begged Ethan to cover for him. Ethan said he didn't want to tell me because he knew how it would sound, that it would make everything worse, that it wasn't relevant. I didn't see anything he said. I just waved at kids, walked the loop, changed back, and went to meet you. I asked him again. "Did you see Mason?" He looked down. "I saw a lot of kids. I got up and left." Reyes didn't seem surprised. "I believe him," she said. I asked how. She said, "Because he's not hiding anything now. If he were guilty, he wouldn't have admitted that at all. He's a coward, not a predator. But someone else might have known he wore the suit and used it." She pulled out a printout from the park's employee records. There were 2 mascot suits that day, one blue, one pink. One assigned, one not. I leaned over the table. What if there were two bunnies Reyes called in a favor? A retired tech from SCPD, someone named Jamie, who now worked freelance with digital reconstructions. They went through archived surveillance footage, cell phone videos, news clips, everything they could find from that day. After hours of stitching angles together, Jamie showed us what no one else had caught. Two separate instances of the blue bunny costume less than 10 minutes apart in locations too far from each other for one person to have traveled between them. It was undeniable. There had been two people in that suit. One of them was Ethan. The other, still unknown. Later that week, a final envelope arrived. Inside was a second flash drive. The video on it was short. Shaky footage again. A basement hallway. Another door marked with a blue star. A knock. Then a deep voice from behind the door. "We don't say names here." The camera panned briefly across the wall. Scratches below the handle. And faintly carved into the concrete near the baseboard, MW plus TT. The initials were real. The place was real. And whatever had happened down there, Mason hadn't made it up. Neither had Theo. And whoever had worn that second costume, they hadn't vanished. They'd hidden in plain sight. The federal team arrived 3 days after the second flash drive. Reyes had already filed her last report by then, officially stepping away from the investigation, but not really. She kept her distance publicly, but she still called every night, still took notes, still wanted to be copied on everything. The site in Humboldt was sealed off with orange barriers and temporary fencing. Cadaver dogs swept the compound. Ground-penetrating radar scanned beneath the floorboards. I wasn't allowed past the perimeter, but I came anyway every day and sat in the car until sundown. The media never picked it up. Not once. No press conference, no announcement, just silence. When Reyes pressed her old contact in Sacramento PD for answers, she was told the investigation had been elevated. Records were now federal, classified due to scope. That's what they said. She didn't argue. She just told me to keep everything, every file, every video, every message. One night I received another email. No subject, no signature. Just one line. I think I remember a smell. Lemons and metal. There was a hallway. Cold floors. Someone used to whistle. I think I had a friend. His name was Theo. He cried at night. Then one day he was gone. I asked about him. They locked me in the quiet room. I read it twice, then 3 more times. That word quiet took the air from the room. I replied, "Do you remember where the quiet room was? Do you remember the blue bunny?" No reply came. But then, about an hour later, my phone rang. No caller ID. I answered. Silence at first. Then a voice, quiet, low, barely more than a breath. "I think I know who I am." I sat very still. "Is this Mason?" There was a pause. "Then I don't know if that's really my name." "It is," I said. "I'm your mother." Another long silence. Then, "Why didn't you come get me?" I answered slowly. "I didn't know where you were. No one would tell me." "What do I have to do?" he asked. I said, "Whatever you want to say, you can tell me. I believe you." He didn't respond to that. He just said, "Find Theo." And the line went dead. The next morning, Reyes and I pulled everything, again forum posts, archived case notes, the brochure from Ember Light, even old school district filings from Redding and Chico. We found overlapping placements, partial lists of residents, referrals from county behavioral departments that didn't line up with actual enrollment. One name repeated across the years, Dr. Glenn Braver. Another stood out. Emberlight Behavioral Center had once used a warehouse-style facility as its intake hub. That building had long since been repurposed, but the records still held the names of contractors. One of them was listed as a night janitor between 2011 and 2013. Name Keith Nellis. Reyes went quiet when she saw it. "I know that name," she said. She pulled up a printout from the original 2012 investigation at the boardwalk. A maintenance employee dismissed just after Mason vanished. No formal write-up, just listed as terminated for cause. He'd been living out of a van behind the park, never formally interviewed. I asked why. She said he disappeared the same week the case stalled. They assumed he'd just left the state. But now his name was here again, attached to Emberlight. We dug further. Nellis had died in 2016. Overdose. No next of kin. But when they'd gone through his belongings, the incident report had mentioned sketchbooks. Pages and pages of drawings, children masks, symbols. And on one of them, scrawled in blue crayon, were the names Mason and Theo. That was when Reyes made the call. She submitted everything: footage, forensic matches, survivor testimony, even the compound's structural map, to her final contact in federal investigations. Not just missing child evidence, but potential unlawful imprisonment, psychological abuse, multi-victim coordination. Within 72 hours, the case was reopened under long-term abduction. The Children of the Pathway site was classified a former site of interest. All entry required clearance. Reyes was denied. So was I. But they didn't stop me from watching. The agents were methodical. They brought in a forensic archaeologist, a trauma psychologist, a structural analyst. On the second day, they uncovered what looked like a sealed crawl space below the old kitchen. Within it, they found dozens of objects: children's shoes, drawings, photos with faces scratched out. Beneath the blue star room, they found something else. Scratches in the concrete, deep layered, like someone had been clawing for years. And at the edge of the wall, faint but legible, the same carved initials, MW plus TT. This time, directly beside them, another pair, KT. Theo's last name, Tanner. A week passed. Then one morning I found a new message in my inbox. The subject line was blank. The body had only one sentence. "I remember your voice now." Attached was a short audio file. I clicked it. It was Mason, older now, yes, but still him. He was humming. Then softly he sang, "Starlight star bright." The rest broke off. Just those 3 words. I sat very still. That lullaby was ours. I had never written it down, never posted it. And yet there it was, carried across years, remembered by someone who had been told again and again that he was nobody. The agents told me I wouldn't be called to testify. Not yet. They said charges were still being evaluated. They said more victims might be coming forward. That the things found in the crawl space were being matched with missing persons cases from as far back as 2005. But they never said Theo's name. Not once. When I asked about him, they just looked at each other and said, "We're still sorting through the files." That meant no records, no official placement, just like Mason. Just like the others. Mason didn't talk much in those first few weeks. He stayed in the spare room, didn't ask for anything, didn't make eye contact unless I initiated it. He didn't like mirrors or closed doors. He didn't like loud noises or silence either. But he liked music, soft instrumental loops, the kind that played from old wind-up toys. And he liked Juno, my cat, who had taken to sleeping curled at his feet, like she knew something the rest of us didn't. He drew sometimes too. Circles, blank-eyed animals, and always a boy holding a balloon. One night I asked him gently if he remembered the boardwalk. He said yes. I asked him if he remembered who took him. He didn't answer. But he did say one thing. I wasn't the only one. There were others, but they told me I was lucky, because I got to leave, and I knew then we weren't done. Not until we found out what happened to all of them. Not until we brought back more than one name from the dark. It's been just over a year since Mason came home. July 22nd. That date still sits heavy on the calendar, but now it carries something else with it, proof. Not of innocence or justice or even peace, just that he survived. That the child I lost to silence came back with his voice. And every day since has been about learning what that means for both of us. We live in a small house outside of Davis now. 2 bedrooms, crooked porch railing, soft morning light through the kitchen blinds. Mason doesn't like mirrors, and he still wakes up from dreams he can't name, but he laughs sometimes. He reads. He walks to the corner store for milk and always brings back the exact change. He feeds Juno without being asked. He hums when he washes dishes. And when I forget how to breathe, he notices. I don't ask too many questions anymore. When he wants to talk, he does. And when he doesn't, I just sit near him with a book in my lap and let him know I'm still here. The federal team confirmed what we already knew. That the site in Humboldt was used to house children off the record. That the children of the pathway had ties to more than one vanished name. That the scratches in the concrete weren't imagined. But they never gave me a number. Not how many were held. Not how many left. Not how many never got out. Theo's name was never listed officially. There was no paper trail, no photo. Only that drawing, the red X's, the initials in the wall. I asked about him every week for months. The answer never changed. We're still looking, but I don't think they were. And maybe that's what makes it harder. That some names fade so quickly, even when they should have been carved in stone. Ethan came by once. Just once. He stood in the doorway for a long time before Mason let him in. They sat across from each other at the kitchen table. No raised voices, no apologies, just the sound of the ceiling fan ticking above them. After a while, Mason said, "You left me." Ethan shook his head. "I didn't know where you were." Mason looked down at the table. "But you were the bunny." Ethan didn't deny it. He just said, "Not that day. Not when it happened." Mason didn't respond. He got up and left the room, and Ethan never came back. I didn't try to fix it. Some things aren't mine to repair. The last time Mason and I visited Santa Cruz, it was a gray morning. The park was quiet. Too early for rides, too late for crowds. He walked with his hands in his pockets, not saying much. But when we reached the edge of the old arcade, he stopped. There carved into one of the wooden posts were the letters again, MW plus TT. Still faint, still real. He traced them with his fingers. Then he looked at me and said, "Can we go home now?" And I said yes. I still have the note someone left me back in 2012, the one that said, "You don't watch him close enough." I keep it in a drawer with the dinosaur toy, the blue wristband, and the star bracelet, not because I want to remember what was done, but because forgetting it feels like letting it happen again. Mason doesn't ask about it, but he knows where it is. He's not a child anymore. He never really got to be. But he's alive, and that matters more than anyone outside our door can ever understand. We like to believe that justice means someone is punished, but sometimes all it really means is that someone is believed, that a door opens, that a voice once silenced is finally heard, that someone who was told again and again that they were nothing gets to write their name down in full. Mason Whitman. He wrote it himself on the inside cover of a new notebook last week. Block letters, blue ink, no X's. If this story stayed with you, consider sharing it. Say their names. Let them be remembered. Someone always deserves to be brought home.